Right now, the next time you're at a coffee shop or just, walking through the grocery store, I want you to look around.
You're definitely going to see someone with a tattoo. I mean, they're everywhere.
Exactly. And, if you have one yourself, there's this microscopic war happening right beneath your skin, literally right now.
Yeah, it's wild to think about. Millions of your own white blood cells are just actively swallowing toxic ink.
Right. And then they just freeze in place and they die, only to be replaced by like a fresh waves of cells that come in and swallow that exact same ink all over again.
It's not just a painting sitting quietly on a canvas.
No, it's not. It is an endless, decades-long immune system stalemate.
And that biological glitch, the body's inability to clear these pigment particles, that's actually the entire foundation of a practice that predates the written word.
Which is just staggering.
Right. Because we tend to view body art through this highly modern, aesthetic lens today. But the human drive to permanently alter the dermis, it's deeply, deeply embedded in our evolutionary and cultural history.
And that perfectly sets our mission for this deep dive. Because today, we are unpacking the history, the really surprising underlying biology, and the profound psychology of tattooing.
Yeah, we're going to look at how a painful ancient ritual basically evolved into a marker of elite luxury and then, violently swung into a symbol of the criminal underground.
We'll explore the cellular mechanics that make ink permanent, that whole war we just mentioned, and look at how human beings have utilized that permanence, both for like absolute authoritarian control and, on the flip side, profound psychological healing.
And just to give you an overview of the sources we're working from today, they provide a really comprehensive look across multiple disciplines.
Right, it's a huge mix.
It is. We're drawing from archaeological records of mummified ancient remains, the sociological history of 18th century maritime exploration, and modern medical literature, including some fascinating advanced imaging studies from the European Synchrotron Radiation Facility.
So I want to start with the origins, and specifically the language, because even the word tattoo itself feels like it has a story behind it. Where did that term actually originate?
Well, before the 18th century, people in the West didn't even use that word.
Really? What did they say?
If a European encountered someone with body art, they described the practice using terms like painting or scarring or staining. The word tattoo actually derives from the Samoan word tatau.
Tatau.
Yeah, which translates literally to strike.
To strike. I mean, that implies a very different physical mechanism than like a modern needle buzzing away.
It was an entirely different mechanism. Traditional Polynesian tattooing did not use a buzzing machine. It utilized a highly specialized hand tool.
What was it made of?
Often crafted from the wing bone of a flying fox, or sometimes boar tusks. And they'd faction it into this comb-like structure.
Okay.
So the artist would dip this comb into pigment, place it right against the skin, and then use a secondary wooden mallet to rhythmically strike the tool.
So they're literally tapping it in.
Exactly. The force of the strike is what drove the pigment through the epidermis and down into the deeper dermal layer.
Which sounds incredibly painful. But I should clarify something for anyone who might be wondering, because I certainly was when I was reviewing the sources.
Oh, about the military term.
Yeah. Because there's a military drumbeat that's also called a tattoo, and this skin ink term has absolutely nothing to do with that.
Right, totally separate.
That military term actually comes from a totally different Dutch phrase, tapto, which was basically a signal to turn off the beer taps in the taverns.
Just a pure linguistic coincidence that they sound identical in English.
Exactly. But returning to the practice itself you mentioned, it predates the written word. Just how far back in the archaeological record are we going?
We can confidently trace it back over 5,000 years.
5 millennia.
Yeah. The most famous example is Ötzi the Iceman. His naturally mummified remains were preserved in glacial ice up in the Alps.
Right, he's basically the most famous mummy next to King Tut.
Pretty much. He lived around 3330 BCE, and when researchers did radiological examinations, they mapped a total of 61 tattoos on his body.
61 tattoos on a man living over 5 millennia ago.
Whoa.
But what really struck me in the research wasn't just the sheer number of them, but the designs.
Yeah, they weren't what you'd expect.
Right. He wasn't sporting like a tribal sleeve or, cool animal figures. They were mostly just these simple utilitarian lines and crosses.
And the placement of those lines is the key insight here. Scientists performed these advanced radiological scans on his skeleton, and they mapped the exact locations of the marks on his skin.
And what did they find?
They correspond almost perfectly to areas of his body that were suffering from age-conditioned degeneration, just, significant joint wear and tear.
Wait, really?
Yeah. We are talking about osteochondrosis in his lumbar spine and severe cartilage deterioration in his knee and his ankle joints.
Let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this.
Yeah.
If the tattoos map directly over his deteriorating joints, we aren't looking at body art.
No, we aren't.
We're looking at like a permanent ancient form of ibuprofen. It's essentially a medical brace or some targeted pain relief system.
That is exactly what the current anthropological consensus suggests. The incisions were likely made and then rubbed with charcoal soot, and that created a prolonged immune response that might have actually provided localized pain relief.
So it's medical.
Highly medical. Yeah. The mechanics basically mirror an early form of acupuncture, and what makes this just geographically staggering is that Ötzi lived roughly 2,000 years before acupuncture was even documented in China.
Wow. It just completely dismantles the idea that ancient tattooing was purely for, like, aesthetic or social edge. For Ötzi, it was functional biological medicine.
Though we shouldn't assume medicine was the only ancient application.
Fair point.
Right, because if we look at Egypt around the exact same era specifically, there's a naturally mummified man from Gebelen, dated between 3351 and 3D17 BCE. We find the earliest known figural tattoos.
So actual pictures, not just lines.
Exactly. This individual had 2 overlapping depictions on his arm, and they've been identified as a wild bull and a Barbary sheep.
So simultaneously, you have this functional pain relief medicine in the Alps and symbolic storytelling or maybe magic in Egypt.
Right. Humans have been utilizing the permanence of ink literally since the dawn of civilization.
But how did this ancient, highly functional practice transition into the modern Western world? Because for a long time, looking at the history, the West just seemed to have totally forgotten about it.
Yeah, the Western rediscovery, so to speak, of the tattoo is heavily tied to maritime exploration in the 18th century.
Right, the sailors.
Yeah, specifically we have to look at the voyages of Captain James Cook to the South Pacific in the 1760s and 70s. Cook's crew included Sir Joseph Banks, who was this highly educated aristocrat and botanist.
Okay.
And when they arrived in Tahiti and other Polynesian islands, they observed the intricate tattoo practices firsthand.
And they didn't just observe it, right? They brought it home.
They did.
They brought the phonetic word tattoo into the English lexicon. And on his first voyage, Cook actually brought a tattooed Rhyadian man named Omai back to England.
Which was a massive cultural event.
Yeah, Omai was presented directly to King George in the English court.
And Omai's presentation sparked this huge sociological phenomenon. By the 1870s, right in the middle of the Victorian era,
which is a period we typically associate with, like extreme modesty.
Complete conservatism. But despite that, tattoos became a massive fad among British royalty and the upper classes.
That feels so counterintuitive to me. I mean, you picture Victorian elites buttoned up to their chins, right?
Well,
not sitting down for tattoo sessions. Why would the highest echelons of society adopt a Polynesian striking ritual?
Well, it was a form of extreme, private, conspicuous consumption.
Meaning it was a flex.
A huge flex. Getting a tattoo in the 1870s required enormous resources. You either had to possess the wealth to travel by ship to exotic locations yourself, or you had to be rich enough to hire a specialized artisan who had made that journey and brought the skills back.
So it wasn't cheap.
Not at all. It was a bespoke, painful luxury. Figures like Prince Albert and Tsar Nicholas II, they acquired these elaborate custom pieces.
Oh, wow, the Tsar of Russia.
Yeah, and the modesty of the era actually enhanced the appeal, oddly enough.
Because it was hidden.
Exactly. The tattoo was this secret symbol of worldly elite status hidden under tailored clothing, and you only shared it with a select few.
But that elite status obviously didn't last. Because when I think of tattoos, I don't think of Victorian royalty. And the catalyst for its downfall, according to the sources, was a piece of technology.
Right. The electric tattoo machine.
How'd that come about?
So in 1891, a New York tattooer named Samuel O'Reilly patented the first electric tattoo machine. But he didn't invent the mechanism from scratch.
He borrowed it.
He adapted an earlier invention by Thomas Edison. It was called the electric perforating pen, which Edison originally designed for document copying.
Wait, how did adapting a document copier change the actual process of tattooing?
So O'Reilly modified Edison's rotary mechanism, and he added a tube and needle assembly. Instead of an artist manually tapping a bone comb, or hand poking a needle a few times a second,
That takes forever.
takes hours and hours, the electric machine could drive ink into the skin at roughly 50 punctures a second.
50 a second. So you take a process that used to require hours of painstaking, incredibly expensive manual labor, and you make it incredibly fast, highly efficient, and vastly cheaper.
It completely democratized the art form.
But I have to pause here, because in almost every other creative industry, when a new technology democratizes an art form and makes it accessible to the masses, it becomes more culturally entrenched, right?
Usually, yeah.
Like the printing press or the camera, they brought art to the mainstream and elevated it. But with tattoos, making it affordable actually destroyed its cultural prestige.
It is a textbook sociological paradox. The upper-class fascination with tattoos was entirely dependent on gatekeeping. The value wasn't in the art itself. The value was in the exclusivity. The moment O'Reilly's machine allowed, say, an average worker to afford a tattoo for a few cents, the elite abandoned the practice entirely. The status signal just evaporated overnight.
If anyone can get one, the aristocrats don't want one.
Exactly. So from there, the cultural association shifted really aggressively. Because it was now cheap and very accessible in port cities, it was rapidly adopted by sailors, laborers, and eventually the criminal underworld.
Which makes sense.
Right, because the permanence of the mark made it an ideal tool for organizations that required absolute lifelong loyalty.
And we see that play out globally in the sources, like the Yakuza in Japan, utilizing traditional irezumi to signal gang affiliation, or the highly codified visual language of the Russian mafia.
Oh, the Russian mafia tattoos are incredibly specific.
Yeah, where like a specific bell tattoo or star on the knee broadcasts an individual's entire criminal history and their rank in the prison system.
And that transition, from a royal secret to a criminal ledger, it relies entirely on the concept of permanence.
Right.
Whether you are an 18th century duke or a 20th century convict, the power of the tattoo is that it cannot be easily undone. Which brings us back to the biological mechanics we teased earlier.
Why doesn't the human body simply heal a tattoo the way it heals a scrape or a minor burn?
That's the million-dollar question.
And this is the cellular mechanism I mentioned at the very beginning of our deep dive, that microscopic war. Because getting a tattoo is, medically speaking, technically a trauma.
A significant one, yeah.
The machine's needle is bypassing the outer layer of skin, the epidermis, and it's injecting foreign chemicals deep into the dermis.
And your immune system's response to that injection is immediate, and it is aggressive.
It's an invasion.
Right. It registers the puncture wounds and the influx of these foreign ink particles as a dangerous infection. So the body deploys these specialized white blood cells called macrophages.
Macrophages.
Yes. Their biological imperative is to rush to the site of an infection, engulf the foreign invaders, and then carry them away through the lymphatic system to be destroyed.
Okay, let me offer an analogy to help visualize this, because the sources described it so well. Imagine a microscopic game of Pac-Man.
I love this analogy.
The immune system releases all these little Pac-Man ghosts, the macrophages, and they rush over to eat the dots, which are the tiny particles of tattoo ink. They successfully swallow the ink. But here is the critical failure, right?
Right.
The ink particles are too large, and they are too chemically stable for the macrophages' enzymes to break down.
The macrophages essentially choke on the pigment. Because they cannot dissolve the ink and because they are now heavily weighed down by it, they physically cannot return to the lymphatic system.
They get stuck.
They become physically trapped in the dermal matrix. They just sit there, holding the pigment suspended inside their own cellular bodies.
The ghosts eat the dots, but then they just freeze in place. The game simply stops.
But a single cell doesn't live forever, right?
Exactly. What happens when that specific macrophage eventually dies, say a decade later?
Well, when the macrophage reaches the end of its life cycle, it ruptures, and it releases the ink particle back into the dermis.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And the immune system, recognizing the invader all over again, immediately dispatches a fresh macrophage to the site.
So a new one comes in.
The new cell swallows the exact same piece of ink and subsequently freezes in place. Again,
That's incredible.
your tattoo remains visible not because the ink simply stained the tissue like food coloring, but because your body is trapped in a perpetual cycle of attempting and failing to clear the wound.
It is a lifelong standoff. And this cyclical dying and replacing of cells that really explains why tattoos change over time.
Absolutely.
Because every time a cell ruptures and a new one takes over, the ink particles can drift slightly, moving deeper into the skin.
Yeah, that microscopic movement over years.
Like, that's why a tattoo with, crisp, sharp lines at age 20 looks slightly blurred and softened by the time you're age 60.
It also highlights why we must objectively evaluate the materials being injected, because we are not dealing with a neutral biological event.
It's an active chemical presence.
Exactly. While professional tattooing obviously adheres to strict sterilization to prevent bacterial infection, the chemical composition of the inks themselves interacts deeply with our physiology.
Like allergies.
Yeah, allergic reactions, particularly to red pigments, are really common due to the presence of heavy metals like nickel.
And the sources point out that modern ink chemistry has evolved way, way beyond basic plant dyes or, the carbon soot they used on Earthsea.
Oh, absolutely.
Many modern inks rely on complex nanomaterials.
And the implications of those nanomaterials were recently mapped by a major study out of the European Synchrotron Radiation Facility.
The ESRF.
Yes. The researchers utilized a highly advanced technique called X-ray fluorescence to track the exact chemical footprint of tattoo pigments inside the human body.
And what did they find?
They discovered that while the macrophages hold the majority of the larger ink particles in the dermis, the smallest chemical fragments, particularly nanomaterials like titanium dioxide,
which is used to create white pigment, right, or to lighten other colors.
Correct. Those tiny nanoparticles, they do not stay put in the dermis.
Where do they go?
They actually migrate away from the skin and they accumulate in the body's lymph nodes.
Wow.
Yeah. The X-ray fluorescence confirmed that the lymph nodes of tattooed individuals physically take on the color of their tattoos. They are stained by this microscopic chemical runoff.
So a tattoo is not a surface-level decoration. It is a systemic alteration.
Truly systemic.
The chemical signature of that ink becomes a permanent resident inside your immune system's filtration network.
And the researchers noted that while there is currently no conclusive evidence linking this lymph node accumulation to chronic inflammation or, severe health crises in the average person, it does prove that the body never stops processing the ink.
It's always dealing with it. And that biological permanence, the fact that the body traps this ink so relentlessly, is exactly what makes tattoos such a potent instrument for human behavior.
It's a heavy tool.
Because if you can mark someone permanently, you can claim them forever. This mechanism has been weaponized by empires, but it has also been utilized by individuals for, profound healing.
The duality of the permanent mark is striking when you look at the history. Historically, states and empires recognized that stripping away an individual's autonomy often required physically marking them.
Right.
The Roman Empire maintained strict control over enslaved populations, particularly those working in really harsh conditions or gasculum prisons.
How did they mark them?
By tattooing the letters FUG, standing for fugitivus, directly on their foreheads. It was a permanent brand of property and a lifelong deterrent against escape.
And our historical sources detail the incredibly industrial application of this exact concept during the Holocaust.
Yes.
The Nazi regime implemented a system of forcible tattooing at the Auschwitz concentration camp complex. Prisoners were tattooed with specific identification numbers, and in some cases, letters or triangles.
It was horrific.
This was done to systematically strip away their names, catalog them, and entirely dehumanize them.
The administration basically utilized the permanence of the ink strictly for bureaucratic utility and total dehumanization. And in a purely utilitarian parallel, the SS also mandated tattooing for their own personnel.
Oh, their own soldiers.
Yeah, SS soldiers received small tattoos under their left arms denoting their blood types. The permanence was utilized to ensure rapid medical triage on the battlefield, regardless of whether the soldier was conscious or not.
I want to ask you about this because it is staggering to consider the weight of that history.
It really is.
The exact same immune system response, this cellular glitch that traps pigment forever, was utilized by regimes to completely strip people of their humanity, brand them like cattle, and control them.
Yes.
Yet, if we look at modern psychology, that very same biological mechanism is now one of the most effective tools people use to reclaim their bodily autonomy. Isn't that profound?
It's an incredible reversal. The psychological shift over the last few decades is remarkable. The permanence that was once a tool of external control is now sought out for internal empowerment.
Like medical tattoos.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Medical tattoos offer a clear example. We are seeing individuals in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease who are actively choosing to get their own names, their blood types, and emergency contact information tattooed on their forearms.
Oh, wow.
They are using the permanence of the ink as an anchor against their own fading cognition. It's an act of self-preservation.
We also see a massive movement within the breast cancer survivor community.
Yes, the post-mastectomy tattoos.
Right. Following a mastectomy, many patients face a really complex relationship with the resulting scars and the trauma of the surgical intervention.
It's a lot to process.
And instead of pursuing traditional reconstructive surgery, a growing number of survivors are choosing to overlay their surgical sites with intricate, highly decorative tattoos.
And the clinical literature surrounding this practice indicates it is highly, highly effective for trauma recovery.
How so?
The patient is taking a site of medical trauma, a mark they absolutely did not choose, and they are overlaying it with art they deliberately selected. The act of sitting for the tattoo, enduring the pain on their own terms, and permanently altering their visual identity. It is a profound reclamation of bodily autonomy.
They're overriding the narrative of the illness.
Exactly, and this psychological utility extends heavily into general mental health as well. We see individuals purposefully using tattoos to cover self-harm scars.
Which is such a powerful visual shift.
The transformation there is twofold. It physically obscures the visual reminder of past distress, but it also replaces it with a symbol of survival. Similarly, memorial tattoos serve as a permanent mechanism for processing grief.
Right. When someone loses a loved one, the permanence of a memorial tattoo offers a way to keep that person physically present.
So you carry them with them.
Literally. As long as the survivor's immune system keeps fighting that microscopic war to hold the ink in place, the story of the person they lost remains visible to the world. It ensures the memory does not fade.
It really bridges the vast timeline we've discussed today. From an ancient hunter seeking localized pain relief in an alpine glacier to a modern individual seeking emotional relief from grief, the fundamental human desire to permanently alter our biology remains totally unchanged.
So let's step back and look at the full picture of what we've unpacked in this deep dive today. A tattoo is never simply a fashion statement or just a reckless decision.
Definitely not.
It is a biological battleground where your cells fight an unwinnable war. It is a historical ledger that tracks the wild fluctuations of human class, shifting from Victorian palaces to maritime ports based entirely on the invention of an electric pen.
Yeah.
And it is a deeply personal, permanent narrative written directly into the dermis.
It's a biological paradox that humanity has learned to leverage for both control and liberation.
So the next time you are standing in line at the grocery store and you see someone with a tattoo, or the next time you look in the mirror at one of your own, I want you to think about the immense, unseen effort keeping that image alive.
The millions of macrophages.
Millions of your cells are working tirelessly right in that exact second to hold that history in place, keeping the story alive.
It adds an entirely new dimension to how we perceive the people around us.
It really does. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought regarding that microscopic war we've been talking about.
Ooh, this is the part about laser removal.
Yes, because we know that laser tattoo removal works by utilizing high-powered Q-switch lasers to blast the dermis.
Right. The light energy essentially breaks the molecular bonds of the ink. It fragments those really large pigment particles we talked about into pieces that are finally small enough for the macrophages to swallow and actually carry away.
The immune system is finally given the assistance it needs to win the stalemate and clear the dermis.
Right.
But the body doesn't actually expel the ink.
It doesn't.
As we saw from that synchrotron imaging study, those fragmented chemical particles simply travel through the lymphatic system, and they accumulate in your lymph nodes.
Forever.
Which means, even if you endure all those painful laser treatments to visually erase a tattoo from your skin, the ink never truly leaves you.
It just relocates.
It simply relocates deeper into your internal biology. So imagine a future thousands of years from now, when future archaeologists are excavating our remains, just like anthropologists studied Ötzi the Iceman. What will they deduce from the invisible internal tattoos we leave behind in our bones and tissues?